Well, Adam, hey, thank you so much for being on today. Really have enjoyed just the opportunity to get to know you a little bit. And what I'd like to dive into first is it's my understanding you abide by what you kind of call Adam's rules. So I'd love to kind of hear the impetus for those rules and how you apply them in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So first and foremost, yeah, these are rules that I live by. I don't try and push rules on anybody else. But really, these have been generated over the last 15, 20 years in sales from good managers and some okay managers, but really also just kind of personal experiences. So as I've gone through things, I started to write down like 6, 7 years ago. I wrote them all down on a dry erase board to say, this is how I want to interact with the marketplace. This is how I want to lead my team. And this is how I want people to engage with me, to know that these are kind of the things that I live by. And a couple of those, probably are not surprising, right? I like to not have surprises. Birthday party surprise, no problem. Missing a number because of something we could have controlled, not a great surprise. No time like the present. I think there's just something to be said there. Back in the day when I was in the field all the time, I wrote on my windshield with the dry erase marker, have I done everything today to move the business forward? And a lot of that came out of that. Like, there's right now I can go make another sales call. Right now I can pick up the phone and call somebody. Right now I can go do something else, as opposed to delaying it and that procrastination. So to have that as a rule and see it on my board every day, just continue to drive that forward, whether it was the windshield or it was the dry erase board at home. And then some of the other ones, just I do like to be as generous as I can. I'd like to give back. I like to be able to help where I can. And some of that dabbles into servant leadership. I don't mind getting my hands dirty. I don't mind if you're in the OR and you're taking out the garbage. I don't mind doing that if I can be of assistance and help. But obviously applies to those that I'm trying to have as customers, but also those that I work with as employees.
I love that so much, especially the fact that you kind of diligently wrote this out and used it as a daily refresher, because I think that's the key element. It's so easy for us to get caught up in the day-to-day minutia and to get pulled in a lot of different directions. I talk to sales managers frequently, and what you hear from them is, oh, well, I'm putting out fires, I'm getting pulled in a lot of different directions. Are you allowing that to limit your effectiveness? And is that taking away from kind of your golden rules? And I think that's what we have to challenge ourselves with and challenge other managers with. There's 3 things that I really wanted to hone in on that stood out to me from what you pointed out. So number one, the no surprises piece. I love that. And the other element to that is often, even amidst some of the surprises that we do face, how do we keep that steady hand on the wheel? Often as leaders, we've got to help our teams see around corners based on some of the experiences that we've had, and also be very transparent with, with them as far as, our expectations. And so that's what I love so much about the rules, because you can lay out like, hey, these are the types of things that I need to know about. You're empowered to go out and run your business the way you see fit. That's what you're paid to do. I'm not paid to tell you how to do that, but these are the things that I need from you in order to effectively coach and to effectively lead and to effectively guide. The other thing was doing it now. I kind of make a list every day of daily non-negotiables, and before I get sucked into, my email vortex or all of the messages that I've got to get caught up on, I've got to make significant dents in those daily non-negotiables. And so that's important to me. And that's the way we see real progress, because a lot of times, if we get swept into a lot of different directions, and then at the end of the day, you look back and you say, well, I don't really feel like I was super productive today. That's how that happens. So I go down my list every day and I just say, is there something I could do to impact this area of importance? If there is, do it then, and then move on, and obviously get to things in their correct order. The last piece was the servant leadership one, and I always feel like, for me, it's how do I show up with value to everybody that I touch in the ecosystem? And that could be valued customers, that could be partners, that's people on my team, that's people internally. Understanding what looks like a win to everyone. But one of the things that really jumped out, Adam, was when we were talking about servant leadership, it's understanding that in each individual scenario, you've really got to show up to, with that mindset of, I want to do something here that's going to be helpful. And it's not really always with an outcome at heart. And I would love to hear more about how servant leadership has helped you establish an environment conducive to collaboration.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing, so I had a motto that I still use today, used it a lot more when I was in the field in the OR, was I want them to know when I'm there and miss me when I'm gone. So it implies two things. One is a salesperson, I'm just going in there trying to sell because they probably don't want you back if that's how you're doing. But I'm going in there, I'm providing value. But to that part of servant leadership, I'm not totally sure each day what that value is, but it's incumbent upon me to bring everything I can. So more education, reading at night, taking care of things on my own, knowing more about either the case or the business that I'm going into, so that whatever questions arise, let me provide as much value as I can. So when I leave, I want somebody to say, you know what, get that little man back in here. I want to talk to him about what we were going through, right? I want to provide that value. And again, even if that value for the day was I took out the garbage or I went and got you a cup of coffee, I just want to be able to be an asset to you. And then while I'm there, maximize that. And that's really what's one of the other rules are, right? Is maximize the value in your messaging. So while I'm there, while I'm happy to get you a cup of coffee, I might also be able to teach you something or let's talk about a situation. So a lot of them start to overlap. But I just think that's the part of really kind of being a servant leader too, is being willing to do whatever it takes. You're there to serve, whether it's the customer or especially with the team that I manage. I wanted to help them, and it really came from that place of whatever I can do to help you. And just to circle back on the no surprises, surprises will happen. And I think the underlying thing there, right, is that you're going to communicate it. So if you got surprised by a doctor left your territory or a competitor came in and gave a better price and we lost the business, that can happen. Hopefully it doesn't, that can happen. But the biggest thing is what do you do from there? Do you then communicate that and make sure everybody knows so we have more time to react?
So much good stuff to unpack there. I mean, just even on the surprises piece, I mean, you're right, they happen. And, I think we've all learned from scenarios where, it's so important to look back and do kind of a post-mortem on a lost deal, or to go back and kind of look at a scenario and even a situation where we won and say, how could we have done this better? How could we maybe have met the customer differently? How could we have met our team differently, and done this in a way that maybe raise the flag when there, is a sign of a potential competitive threat. I enter those situations with an overabundance of caution, obviously, or often because, obviously we all get burned at some point or another with some type of surprise. And the best thing we can do is control the controllables, but also when they happen, kind of take that step back and say, okay, let me analyze the playing field and make the right next steps, get the right people involved, communicate the right things, because again, that's what it's all about in my mind, is that communication. When you were establishing some of the pieces around servant leadership, what I thought really jumped out to me, Adam, was you're creating relationships from a place of authenticity. Yeah. And you're investing in those relationships. You don't know what that end result is going to be, but I talk to salespeople all the time, and they're confounded because they think that their approach is succinct, they think their story is great, they think their product is best in market, and that's all fine and good. But at the end of this, people buy from people. They can do a significant amount of research, and so it's almost like the hustle stats. I'll use a sports analogy. It's the things that we do that are differentiators that stand apart from everybody else. Like what you said, you're willing to do just about anything to invest in the relationship, with no promise of anything beyond that. And those are the things that stand out. The best relationships that I've ever formed in my sales career have been the ones where we really truly understood. First off, we knew about each other's family. We would sit down, we would have meals together, but we actually legitimately knew each other's business goals and challenges. We knew each other's timelines, when it would make sense for me to lean in for them, and they needed to make a report to their board or whatever it is, empowering them, arming them with stuff that was going to make them look good, understanding what was a win to them and delivering on that, even if it didn't have an immediate material impact for me. Right. And then on the flip side, when we needed to get a deal done, they knew what our levers were. I had a scenario years ago where I no longer supported this customer before. And there was a deal that was dragging on and on and on and on and on. It was a renewal deal. And I ended up getting a call to come in, and we got it done in 45 minutes because I had the relationship with these folks. I knew what they cared about. They knew what I cared about. And we were able to get to where we needed to get because there was a relationship there. I think that's what's lost on people. And whether it's working with a customer, whether it's working with a team, relationships and investing in relationships continually and caring about where each other are and sitting in pain together when it comes or surprises, that's what really helps us go the distance together.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. So Father's Day, right, just happened, and I learned everything I know about sales from my dad and have thankfully evolved a little bit. But he used to always say all these phrases, right? And one of them that I never understood when I was a kid was, I could sell a ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves. Like that is the exact opposite of what you just talked about, right? That is bringing a product to market that nobody wants, and it's selling it to somebody that doesn't want it. Like that's the opposite of selling, right? And that was the way that I think sales used to be versus the way it is now. It is relational. You got to make sure you're bringing the right product to the right person. Nobody wants a ketchup popsicle. But, what do you want and how can I help you get there and make sure that they know that I'm really there coming from, truly a place of genuineness to say, look, I want to help you as a customer. And if I can't, that's okay. That's why Progressive is so, I think, good in the market, right? They're going to give you a couple of opportunities. So
buyers are empowered now, Adam. I mean, you read the statistics, they're 57% of the way down the buying journey before they even engage a seller.
Yeah.
So, and it's because there's so much knowledge and information at their fingertips. And I think it's a good thing. I'm a big believer in, pure capitalism. There's obviously room for competition. It makes us all better. I've seen just in the light of the last few years how good what competition has done has made us up our game here at Microsoft as an example. But, I think competition is healthy, but with all of that comes great responsibility for our sellers and our sales teams, because that's where we have to set ourselves apart. It isn't about just showing up and articulating everything that we think is great about what we do or who we are. The customer likely already knows a lot of those competitive differentiators. However, what it is important for us to do is understand the points of view that matter for our customers. It's important for us to show up with value, whatever that looks like, and legitimate value, and invest without hope of outcome. And then also those differentiators, like how often and how frequently we communicate, how responsive we are. I've had a lot of customers in my time tell me, like, hey, Carson, your product is more expensive, but we've done business with you and with your organization because you respond every single time we ask a question. Even when I didn't have the immediate answer, they would see the trail of, me sending, the notes internally to loop them in that we were diligently following, getting the answer. Customers like communication. They like transparency, just like people on our teams do. And I think that is one of the lost arts is that key element around communication. Every one of your rules is pretty intrinsic to communication. Looking at lack of surprises, or at least communicate with me what the surprise may look like. Facts. And less from from an emotional perspective. I did a segment recently around emotion in the sales process, and it's inevitable. But again, we've got to keep that steady hand on the wheel, and we've got to focus on the facts, because we're not going to be able to sell agendas internally or influence customers with emotion. So I think communication is key. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one, to highlight what you're saying about the responsiveness, I just got emails back today. Thank you for the fast response. And it was still within an hour or two, right? So there's just that value of knowing that somebody's actually getting back to you, whether it's email, text messages, all the different avenues we have now. But it is all in all about that communication. You come across genuine, you've done your homework. You touched on that as well. You've done your homework to add the value, because you already know that they've probably done their research. They can get 57% of it online or wherever else. So to be able to come in and really kind of walk through everything and continue to communicate in a way that does drive that value home, I think is incredibly important. And it is a bit of a lost art. I think we've gotten lazy by the immediate instant messages and things like that, as opposed to really doing our homework and pulling things together. That's why I love this forum that you have, to be able to just continue to disseminate information. And for those that are going to do the homework, they're going to be enriched to be able to go and become a better salesperson, whatever role they end up going into. So.
It's so powerful. I tell sellers all the time, it's the same as applying to a job. You may
Yeah.
be up against 100 to 1,000 other sellers or people that are applying to the same job. I'm a big believer in probability. Your odds are 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000 in those instances. What are you doing to influence your buyer or the hiring manager to look at you as opposed to all these
Yeah.
others? I don't care how good of a job fit you feel like it is. You've got to do things to de-risk the decision, whether it's for
Yeah.
a hiring manager or for a buyer. And something else that you said too, because one of the things that I talk to a lot of leaders as well is really shifting that focus to your leadership brand. The things that got you to a role of leadership aren't going to get you to the next outcome that you're looking for, whether it's command and mastery of your role as a leader, which we're always learning, obviously, or getting to the next level. You highlighted something here: give credit when due. It's not your glory anyway. And I like that a lot, because when I talk to leaders, I try to really resound the messaging that you're not the hero, you're the hero maker. And you've got to find the way to empower your team to feel like they have the resources, the training, everything that they need to go out and be successful, and that you're there, even if they don't do exactly what you tell them to do. Right? I mean, that's not the
Right.
expectation. It's very similar to parenting. You can set
Yeah.
the foundation, but you can't force them to do exactly the way you want them to do or you think you want them to do. They're going to go out, they're paid to do it. Either they earn the right to be in the role that they're in and they're paid to do it. You can obviously influence and coach and be there and be accessible. But I think that one is super important, giving credit where due. Can you think of some good examples, where we as leaders should be really proactively looking for ways to recognize, to make sure that people feel seen in that environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you get into the quasi-political meeting at work, right? And you're presenting something. If somebody else helped you, you've got to be able to pull them in and give them credit. Give them a point, an opportunity to have some time to talk and present on the material they know about. There's nothing more empowering for that person, and I think mutually for you. It does go back to that servant leadership. If I want to be up there and I'm only the one talking, that doesn't do us all any good. I want them to know who the experts are. I mean, I remember I've been taught bundled payment by other people in the market because I didn't know it at the time, right? That was extremely helpful. I learn every day about ASCs that I'm in now. And I want to be able to give credit to the people that have taught me, because they deserve the credit, but they also deserve that light that would come from leadership to say, hey, tell me more about this. And I just feel like that builds that instant credibility with you as a person and you as a leader as soon as you give credit to somebody else, especially when it's due. I mean, there's just no easier way to build up your own credibility.
Couldn't agree more, Adam. I think that's an important one to sit in for a second, because, you know, even when you talk to someone who maybe they feel like there's a relationship that they have that's touching a political situation, a deal, whatever it is, they may feel like that's a blocker. They
Yeah.
may feel like that even in a customer interaction, that, oh, hey, this person is a blocker in getting this done. But there's a lot of power in recognizing the attributes, the positive attributes or contributions of the person that maybe on paper you view as a blocker. And I'll give you an example. Several years ago, I had a deal scenario where, this individual is an executive at an organization. They shunned a lot of my overtures to try to create a relationship. Imagine that, right? I mean, that never happens to sellers, but it was one of these situations where, and I ended up creating some relationships elsewhere in that organization. I kind of created a groundswell, and eventually they had to meet with me.
Yep.
And they weren't overly thrilled to be in the room. And I told this person, like, look, hey, I've done a lot of research on you and your organization. I've seen some of the things that, like, you're very passionate about based on some of the blogs that they had posted and articles that they had made and things of that nature. And at the end of this, and I told them, I'm like, look, I just want to find a win for you. And if that's not with me, and if that's not with my organization, fair enough. However, we've had some success in this realm and what you claim you want to do, and I'm willing to invest the time to explore it. And so I was very much recognized the positive attributes that I saw out of this person. And sometimes there's contentious elements on sales teams, right? Maybe different egos get involved, or different priorities. That happens all the time. But the more inclusive we are proactively, to seek out these perspectives and say, even if somebody, might be holding up a deal, recognizing the importance of their perspective, recognizing their contributions, even though if you're not thrilled with every single thing they did, it goes a long way in showing that you want to invest in that relationship. And I think that's extremely important. And it kind of ties into, kind of your last one, which is the, love all people. Give everybody that opportunity to be at the table, give recognition where it's deserved, and sometimes, proactively give recognition even when the relationship isn't where you want it to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a whole lot to be said about grace, right? I mean, when you're sitting in a room, we have a lot of competitive salespeople. That's probably why we're in sales to begin with. One, you can diffuse a lot of that if you're going to give credit to them if they've done something right. There's an easy way that you don't have to seem like you've got to be the lead person. And then to follow that up with, listen, I'm going to do my best to love everybody. I don't expect you to, but I'm going to try and give a lot of grace in these situations. You have no idea what the backstory is in some of the people that are in the room. You want to be able to try and help them walk through a situation. Again, get them to where there's something that fits them, whether it's my product, like you said, whether it's my product or your product or another product. Either way, I want to be able to be in that room and provide as much love and grace as I can. And those are not words you hear an awful lot, right? You don't hear them in the OR an awful lot about, hey, look, I'm here to, love on you. But essentially I am. I'm here I want to try my best to take care of you. I'm going to fall short at times, but I'm going to continue to try, get back up and do it again.
I love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
The human element. Yeah, the human element.
Yeah.
Something that I think is powerful here, Adam, you wrote this 6-7 years ago, and it's kind of a conglomeration of a lot of different lessons you've learned along the way. The beauty in that actually echoes back to something that we were talking about earlier, is that, look, sales has changed fundamentally over time. I mean, there's a lot of elements. I started out in a call center environment. I've been in inbound and outbound one call close types of environment, obviously very challenging to develop a long lasting, meaningful relationship there.
Sure.
And then compare and contrast that to, what I've done for the last decade of my life, which is very much enterprise based, relationship sales driven. But at the heart of all of that, I think it's key to point out that your fundamentals stay the same. It's how you show up to people. It's how you acknowledge their pain and their priorities. It's how, when there is pain in the relationship, you sit in it. You don't shy from it. You sit in it. You acknowledge where you have, maybe learned, or you can make missteps. Some of the most important conversations I have are when something doesn't work. And you acknowledge that, and you sit and you listen, and you understand exactly the ramifications, and you get the right resources in the boat, and you do the best you can each and every day. Not every day is sunshine and rainbows, but if you keep core to these fundamentals, which have obviously served you very well over time, those things don't change.
They don't. Yeah, I can't say that any of these over the last 6 or 7 years would have evolved much. I mean, these still hold true, which is why I'm still talking about them. These are the things that I do wake up and live by and try and work through. Again, just to try and figure out how I can best bring myself to light. You mentioned kids earlier. Now that's the thing I'm trying to figure out, is how do I make sure my kids know this, right? How do they go into both, school and business this same way to feel comfortable about, where they're at? Some point I'm going to have to write a book and follow in your footsteps, but it's got to be the kid that's sitting at the lunch table by himself, right? Because that was my life for 20 years. Every 2 years I was at a new lunch table, and that's what built a lot of these up, right? Is I was alone by myself until I realized, like, how can I go approach somebody that's from a completely different area? California to Missouri, two totally different cultures, right? So when you get transplanted there as a kid, you've got to. So these have been built out over the last, 40 years of my life, essentially. So, but I'd love to add to it. I think that's the thing too, is as much as they don't change, I would love to have somebody come in and help me learn a new rule, because I think that's the most important part about, especially being salespeople. We do have to learn on a daily basis. There's still growth to be had. So what should be the next rule that I add because I've had another manager that I learned something from, or an interaction with somebody in the market? That flexibility, I think, has got to be there as well.
I love that you said that, because when I talk to sales leaders, you ask what is the most important attribute of a seller or somebody on their team, or what are they looking for? It's coachability.
Yeah.
And where you've highlighted some of these key fundamentals, we're always learning. I'm more cognizant of that now than ever. I mean, don't get me wrong. I was a young, whip smart, 20-plus-year-old sales success story, and I thought I knew everything.
Yes.
But I'm glad I went through that experience because I learned very quickly, no, I didn't know everything, and I was not the smartest person in the room, nor did I want or need to be. And
Right.
that's the key, is when you can go into a room and realize your place in that room and the value that you can bring to that room. In my case, it's the ability to orchestrate conversations. It's understanding and knowing the resources that are at our disposal and bringing that together, and then get out of the way. Like that's been one of the best things for me in my career, is understanding what I'm good at and what I'm not, but what I want to continue to grow with. And I think as sellers, as humans, those are important learnings for all of us to do. But look at all the advances that we've made around data and how we have access to data. We can utilize that to make more informed decisions, to diagnose gaps in process and things of that nature, and some of the tools that we have access to as sellers that we never had access to before. But again, I go back to what I said before. With that comes great responsibility, because I think if anything, that means we've got to take Adam's rules and we've got to abide by them even more diligently, because those are the difference makers.
Right, exactly. To have kind of that ground truth, for sure. Yeah, that whole continued education thing is I think critical as well, because it teaches like instant humility. Like I just started taking some like machine learning AI classes. I can tell you, I maybe learned, I understood about 20% of it. That's a whole new world that I'd love to learn more, but it especially taught me, you're not the smartest person in the room. So to be able to have that humility, and then again, try and learn from those around you. And again, what does that impact for the foundations of your life?
Yeah.
I think there's
and lean into where you're uncomfortable. I think that was another area that for far too long, I was like, I have a knack at this, I'm going to really double down on it and get good. And I think there's some value to that, but also really leaning into discomfort. I love how you highlighted that around AI. One of the things that I want to do is, we actually internally have this big course that internally called the Masters of Healthcare. And I want to take it, and I want to do it because I've served just about every industry vertical there is over my time in my career. I on paper, I came into Microsoft with a telecommunications and an advertising background, right? So these are areas where I really want to lean in, is healthcare competencies, understanding the very real problems and the solutions that we're trying to to provide, how we enhance the patient experience, the provider experience. Those are very important conundrums right now. And then on the flip side of that, more technical competencies, so that I can speak it more fluently. It adds instant credibility. And if it wasn't uncomfortable, if it wasn't like a new muscle to form, then it wouldn't be growth.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And that's what I love coming out of it is, I'm learning, trying to reapply, do different things. And then, what does that ultimately build up to? How can I then, empower somebody else, learn from somebody else? Yeah, I think there's a lot that comes from it. It's not easy to do, right? It is intimidating. I mean, I was at, some of these classes sitting in there and I had no idea what was happening. But again, it's humbling, and I think that's helpful.
I think it's helpful too for sellers, wherever they are in their career, to probably hear two guys like us talking about things that intimidate us, right? Because and we're leaning into those things. Because I think all of us need to challenge ourselves. That's the only way we become our best selves, and we can add more value for everybody that we touch when we have these additional skills and this additional learning.
I think also, especially from a young seller standpoint, you can literally learn from anybody. We've seen a lot of the quotes right on, especially on LinkedIn, about you get to know the janitor as well. I treat the janitor the same as the president. I wholeheartedly believe in that, but you can also learn from that person. In the OR, I would learn from the surgeon. I'd also learn a lot from the anesthesiologist, the circulating nurse, because I would talk to everybody. There's so much value to be had, and being open to, like I didn't know what to talk to an anesthesiologist about, but again, to go at least explore that area and say, look, I'm a little afraid to talk to you, but let me see what we can go learn. And then that rolls into this whole other ground base of knowledge. So I love making myself uncomfortable. It happens quite a bit, whether it's just straight through embarrassment or trying through education, but it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, and you're willing to do it, and there's a vulnerability in that, and I think that's the beautiful thing. That's what's going to open you up to the learning. The first multiple times that I talked to executives, I didn't know what I was doing, but you learn through doing, and then when you're able to go to other people in an organization and say things along the lines of, hey, with the litany of people in your organization that I've talked to, this is some of the feedback I'm getting. that's a value. You're bringing value to that
Yeah.
person now because you're at the pulse of what's happening, and they may not know all of these types of things. I've had many sellers that I've worked with and known, and I myself have been told, like, you have a lot of very valuable intel about the organization because of the relationships you have, and that's how you create that groundswell. Anybody that you talk to in an organization or any role, any title, you can take away some important piece of information, and that's why I think it's important to invest in relationships.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. Yeah, especially as salespeople, be able to understand who to talk to and what information you can glean, and then I think the other important thing is, right, to aggregate that data into value. That's the other part, is to have all these disparate pieces of data is one thing, but as a good salesperson, I think it's aggregating that data into something that's valuable for whomever you're in front of at that time.
Yeah, and
that's what it comes. Yeah.
Yeah, and we all report to somebody, whether it's shareholders or leadership or even just working for our teams. We've got to know what matters to them, and how else are you going to do that without communication? So
yeah, absolutely.
Couldn't agree more. Well, hey, Adam, this has been great. Anything else that you want to hit on or talk about while we're together today?
Yeah, I think this is the biggest part of it. I think going through the rules, those have been in a strong kind of foundation for a long time. We've touched on a lot of my main things as well, as far as the continued education. The communication is key. Back 10 years ago, I wrote these things called brain flows, just trying to share what I learned with my team at the time and then out to the company. I think that's the important part too, is being willing, knowing is half the battle. I'll go to my old G.I. Joe days as a kid, right? But being able to really share that, I think, is the other part of it. Knowing yourself is important, but then being able to share that with those around you to help better the team, I think that's what I'd leave you with. That's the last part of the puzzle, I think, is really to make sure that through that communication, you're sharing that knowledge you've gained. It's not just for yourself.
You said something earlier, you can learn from anyone. And I think that was probably my biggest takeaway is, I know you and I have talked about this before, whether it's a great manager that you worked for, or maybe a manager where the relationship wasn't super solid, there's some takeaway that you can have. And I've taken away, I've had probably, 20 different managers that I've worked for at some point in my life. And I've taken a little golden nugget from every single one of them. And I think that's the key, is look for the learning in every situation. Sometimes we learn the most when we lose, or when things don't go exactly as we anticipate, because rarely is the line to where we are to where we're going a straight line. So you learn on the journey, and that's the key. The other thing, and I've got Dale Carnegie's book back here on my bookshelf, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's really what it's all about. Understanding, where they are, how do I show up in a meaningful way to them? And then ultimately, that's how you can influence change. You de-risk the decision by forming a genuine relationship.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more. I've got the same book. Love it.
It's a good one. It's timeless. Well,
Exactly.
Adam, thank you so much. This was amazing. I knew this would be a good conversation. So thank you for imparting some words of wisdom for our audience and me today. And we'll see you next time.
Very much appreciated, Carson. Take care. Thank
You're
you.
good. You too. Thank you.